Brookfields Hotel. Good morning. How can I help you?
Oh, good morning. My name's Richard Jones. I'm a representative for the ICDF, the International Cooperation and Development Fund, based in Taiwan.
Sorry, the
Yeah,
IC...
the ICDF, the International Cooperation and Development Fund of Taiwan.
The ICDF. I see. And sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Richard Jones.
Richard Jones. Okay, so how can I help you?
Well, we're organising a conference in November next year, and we are currently in the process of looking for venues.
I see.
So I understand from your website that you offer conference facilities, and I'm just phoning to discuss the possibility of holding the conference on your premises.
I see. Well, firstly, could I ask how many people will there be attending?
In the region of 50 to 60. Would that be a problem for you?
No, Mr. Jones, not at all. The main conference room can seat over 200, and we have a smaller room which accommodates 90. That will suit you best. Regarding accommodations, as you can see from the website, we have 300 guest rooms in the hotel also.
Right. And we're looking at the third weekend in November next year. So how's your availability for then?
Well, at the moment, we could accommodate you quite comfortably for that weekend.
I see. Okay.
And could I just check before we go any further? How many of the attendees will be staying in the hotel? All of them?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, regarding food and refreshments, what will you require?
Well, we were hoping for a reception on the Friday evening with wine, beer, soft drinks, along with some light finger food. Then we'd require breakfast, lunch and dinner on the Saturday, and breakfast and lunch on the Sunday. On the Sunday night, we'd prefer buffet-style dinner so we can mingle more easily. And then we'd also require breakfast on the Monday morning.
I see. So the standard menus would be okay for all meals except Sunday evening.
Yes, I think so.
And if I may, one more question.
Yes, of course.
Would you have any idea how many of the guests would arrive by car? We have a large car park at the rear of the hotel, but during the weekend...
Well, I think very few. Probably nobody, I would imagine. If I could just check a few more points with you.
Yes, of course.
Firstly, regarding the conference facilities, in the smaller conference room you mentioned, what kind of internet access do you have?
The internet connection is the same as the main conference room. It's a high-speed wireless connection.
Okay, and what equipment do you have in the room for presentations?
We have a projector for PowerPoint presentations and a screen, of course. We also have a flip chart, and we provide pens for that. We can also supply pads and pens for each table if you require.
Okay, that takes care of the conference room, I think. Regarding the guest rooms, presumably they have bathrobes.
Yes, they do.
And what other extras do you provide?
Well, there is free wireless broadband in every room. We also provide a complete range of ladies' and gents' toiletries. Your choice of daily newspaper is delivered every morning, and we also provide a bowl of fruit to conference guests.
That's a nice touch.
Well, we hope so.
Okay, and regarding the hotel facilities, could I just check with you the opening hours for the swimming pool, please?
Yes, the pool opens at 6:30 and closes at 10 o'clock in the evening.
Okay, very good. So I think that just leaves the issue of price. I think we would be looking for a considerable discount for this booking, a block booking.
Yes, of course. For the number of guests you mentioned, we'd be looking at about a discount of 12% on the standard room rates. For November, the standard room rate is £180 per room per night. So after the 12% discount, that would be £158.40 per room per night.
£158.40, right, I've got that.
Now, we would be able to improve on that if it was an early booking. If you confirm 3 months before the conference date, we would be able to offer a 14% discount, and that would bring the price to $154.80 per room per night, and that would be the lowest price that we could offer.
Okay, I see. So that's £154.80.
Yes, that's it.
Okay, well, I think that's about it for the time being. Sounds quite promising. We'll need to evaluate it against other options, of course.
Oh, yes, of course.
Could I just take note of your name, please, before I go?
Of course, Richard Ackroyd.
Sorry, Richard. Sorry, could you spell your surname, please?
Oh, of course, it's Ackroyd.
Okay, got it. Many thanks. Okay, I'll get back to you, Richard, in a couple of weeks' time.
Well, we look forward to hearing from you. Could I just take a contact number for you as well?
Good afternoon, everyone. Great to see so many of you here. Well, let's make a start. As you know, I'm going to talk about the charity bike run, which is coming up just 3 months from now, in Rajasthan, India, of course. So, these 3 months are going to fly by, and you'll need to make sure that you manage to get your sponsors sorted out and to reach the required levels of fitness for the ride. So firstly, regarding sponsorship, you should have started collecting a list of potential donors, people you intend to contact in the near future. Now, when you do contact them, don't make light of the challenge because, well, there's nothing light about it, and although we intend to thoroughly enjoy it, our ultimate goal here is to raise as much as we can for the Heart Foundation. So, as I say, don't make light of it. Tell people exactly what's involved. Tell them about the weather conditions, the road conditions, the distance that you're expected to travel daily, and tell them about the accommodation too. We don't want people thinking you're staying in 5-star hotels at the end of each day. Also, again, regarding donors, it's important for people to know beforehand how their money will be spent. So, please don't forget to tell them that this charity has a track record of spending just 30% of donations on covering the cost of events, and the remaining 70% always goes directly to the people in need. Any questions I've not answered regarding sponsorship, please have a word with me later. So, next on the list, fitness. Now, it's really impossible for me to overstate the importance of reaching the required fitness level. You should be well into the fitness program by now, and you really can't afford to miss a single day. You need to be putting in about 3 hours training on a daily basis, and you should be getting to the point where you're quite comfortable with this. Anything below this, 2 hours, say, is not going to be enough. And if you're doing 4 or 5 hours, well, you may be overdoing it. Okay, if you've looked ahead at the fitness program, you'll have seen that next week we recommend training with your pannier racks and the panniers fitted. So, you'll need to load the equivalent weight of a full pack in your panniers, and if you're intending to bring a small backpack, then you should be carrying that as well during your training. You don't have to start with a full pack, of course. You could build up in stages, but it's important to get to train with the load of a full pack as soon as possible. To continue to emphasize the importance of fitness, just let me show you some slides from last year's event, and you can perhaps get a better idea of the kind of terrain you'll be faced with. So in this first slide, you can see how we start off through some small villages where the road is narrow, uneven and quite windy, and it starts to climb. So right from the start with a full pack, you're going to be pushing uphill. This next slide shows the terrain on day 2. Here we're on the hilltops. We're pretty high up and the humidity can be high too. Skipping day 3, here's a day 4 slide. We're on the flat travelling past some ancient temples, but you can see the road surface is not exactly up to Formula 1 standard. Just one more slide. This is the last day, and you can see we're travelling through almost desert terrain. It's hot and it's dry. Okay, from your expressions, I think you're starting to get a clearer picture of the challenge. Right then, as promised, a quick look at the itinerary for the 7 days. If you'd like to turn to that, it's on page 10 of the handout. So day 1, we arrive in Agra. That will be at 5:45 local time. It will then take us a good hour to get through baggage, claim and customs, if not longer. Then we've got an hour's bus ride to the hotel. So arrival time at the hotel is going to be about 8:30. The plan is then to get some much needed rest. So hopefully we'll be able to get about 4 hours sleep. For those of you who are up to it, there's also an afternoon excursion to the Taj Mahal. We'll be back at the hotel quite early. We've requested a fairly plain evening meal, by the way. Grilled chicken, rice and vegetables. We'll then be getting an early night because, as you probably know, we start cycling at 7 a.m. the following morning. So day 2, we start cycling from Kanua at 7 in the morning. It's about 30 minutes from the hotel, so we'll leave here at 6:30. We'll be spending most of the day cycling through fields, small villages and past many temples. There won't be many photo opportunities, I'm afraid, because we want to reach the overnight camp at Peshawar before dark. On day 3, the pace will be a little slower. We'll be travelling through some of the most scenic countryside in Rajasthan, and weather permitting, you should be able to get some incredible shots of the ancient hilltop forts and the valleys below. The overnight camp is on the edge of Sariska Park, and if we're lucky, we should be able to watch the monkeys playing in the trees. Day 4, well, the terrain will change quite unbelievably. We'll be cycling in pretty arid conditions through sand dunes, and in fact we'll be camping down in the sand dunes overnight. This itself is an incredible, very atmospheric experience. Day 5 will be the last day of cycling, and at that point you probably won't be sorry. The challenge will end at Lal Mahal, where a more comfortable night's sleep awaits us. On day 6, we'll travel to Jaipur, or the Pink City as it's known, and you'll have time to look around there and to visit the Amber Fort. Then, on the final day, we have a celebratory lunch together in a really great restaurant there, before starting the journey home. Okay, no doubt you have some questions.
How are you getting on with the latest assignment then?
Okay, thanks. I've been trying to follow through on what we agreed in the last tutorial. Some of it's fine, and some of it, well, I'm not sure about it, to be honest.
I see. Well, would you like to talk me through what you've done so far, and then we can go on to look at the parts you're unsure about?
Fine, thanks. Okay, well, last time we agreed that I should narrow my focus to 3 countries. And so I decided on Laos, Vietnam and Cambodia.
Okay, I see. I think that's a good choice. I mean, to consider countries who are neighbours.
Oh, good. And the task you set was to research average weekly wages in 3 countries, along with the numbers of people living below the poverty line in each country.
That's right, yes. I have a note of that here. So how did you get on with that?
Well, I found several development agency websites which were very useful, but quite often they seem to be publishing different answers to the same question. I mean, if you look at the figures for Cambodia, for example, on the website of the IMF, the WHO, and the UN ECOSOC, the Economic and Social Council, you get a slightly different story from each one.
Well, yes, there will be, of course, variations if these organisations are carrying out their own independent research.
I see, yes. I hadn't really considered that, so what figures should I include?
Well, you have several options. You could quote figures from just one source, from the research which you feel is the closest match to what you're looking at. Another option would be to quote a range of values and give a list of the sources you have used in your reference section.
Okay then, thanks for that.
Right, well, was there something else you were unsure about?
Yes, the other thing was how much time or space should I devote to the history of the 3 countries, the political side and the conflicts that have taken place between them in the last 60 years.
Well, the history is background information, and as we mentioned before, you need to think of this like an inverted pyramid. You start with the broader picture, but you really don't need to go into too much detail, and then you focus down to the relatively small part of this picture that you are researching. What you write in terms of the bigger picture should be relevant to your research so that the reader can see how everything links together.
Okay, thanks. I think I'm clear about that now, yeah.
Well, there's a good example of this in the writing guide handout, week 3, I think.
Ah, yes, sorry, I remember seeing that now. Yeah.
No problem. Okay, so was there anything else?
Actually, there was just one more thing, if I may.
Yeah, sure, far away.
I was wondering whether I need to talk about the role of some of the neighbouring countries, such as Thailand, for example. Well, I read a little about other neighbours, and there are some connections.
Well, again, you have to be careful not to go too wide and to spread yourself too thinly. If you do this, your assignment is going to become very large and probably exceed the word limit. Or if you manage to stay within the word limit, it may become just too shallow. Remember that what you're trying to do is to mention the main environmental or background factors to this situation, but then focus on just one aspect. So you need to assess for yourself really how relevant Thailand's role is to your research.
Okay, so I need to have another think about that.
Yes, I think so. So shall we move on? So, additional tasks for this assignment.
Right.
Yeah, I think you should have a closer look at the natural resources of each country.
Would that not be outside the scope of what I'm looking at?
I don't think so. If you have a closer look at the natural resources available, such as the forestry industry, agriculture, iron ore, etc., and the problems governments sometimes face in accessing these, some of these countries' valuable resources are located in protected areas, in World Heritage Sites, for example. I think the purpose of doing this is that it should give you a deeper understanding of why we are where we are today.
I see. Yeah, that sounds very interesting. Thank you very much.
Well, you're very welcome. I also think that the main benefit of doing this is that it will give your assignment far more depth.
Okay, well, thanks again. Regarding reading, any suggestions as to where I should start?
Yeah, just a second. A good starting point is a report published just over a year ago by the World Bank. You'll need to go to worldbank.org.
Okay, worldbank.org.
And the title of the article you're looking for is Poverty Environment Nexus.
Poverty Environment Nexus. Okay.
If you have any problems finding it, just send me an email. I'm sure I've got a link to it somewhere.
Okay, I'm sure I'll be able to find it. Thanks again.
Okay, now also at the end of that article there is of course a reference section, and in there you'll find some interesting stuff which will help direct your reading on natural resources.
Oh, I see. Excellent. Thanks. That's great.
My advice would be to focus on articles between 2000 and 2008. That's when most of the in-depth studies were carried out. There's not really been much of any relevance since then.
Oh, that's really great. Thanks ever so much.
You're welcome. Let me know when you're ready to sit down again for the next, for the last tutorial.
We're going to continue our analyses of Nigeria, or the Federal Republic of Nigeria, as it is officially named. The next item on our list is oil. Nigeria has a lot of it. Its oil reserves are estimated at 36 billion barrels, and its current crude oil production is around 1.6 million barrels a day. With this capacity level, it is of course a member of OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. So, what kind of positive and negative impact has this commodity had on the nation? Well, somewhat tragically, there would seem to be very few positive outcomes and rather a large number of negative ones. I will just mention the positive side first, because I won't need to spend much time on it. Since Nigeria became part of OPEC back in 1970 when their GDP started to be recorded, revenue from oil production had been between approximately 20 billion and 80 billion US dollars annually, clearly a huge income for the country. And from these numbers, if we didn't know otherwise, it would be fair to assume that Nigeria is a wealthy and prosperous land. Unfortunately, we do know otherwise, and that brings me rather quickly to the negative impact of oil in Nigeria. The negative issues can be grouped into three main categories: the political, the economic, and the environmental. Starting with the political, there are two main points. First of all, the presence of the dark nectar in Nigeria has led to some of the terrible conflicts which have taken place since its discovery in 1956. This social disorder and unrest has had a knock-on effect on the stability of production, resulting in buyers often having to look for more reliable sources to supply their demand. Secondly, oil in Nigeria has led to widespread corruption, racketeering, and fighting between rival ethnic groups. Economically, despite the huge revenues generated, Nigeria remains one of the poorest countries in the world, with the vast majority of Nigerians still living in poverty. The main reasons behind this are threefold. Firstly, most of the revenue from oil production goes to the foreign multinational oil companies, with the Nigerian government apparently receiving less than 50% of the profits. Second, of the income which the government does receive, far too much is squandered and not invested back into the local economy. Thirdly, with oil responsible for staggering 96% of GDP, there has been an over-dependence on it as an industry. This has led to neglect, both in terms of government interest and government investment in other sectors, notably agriculture and light manufacturing, two sectors which, at one time, showed great potential. Moving on then to our third negative, the effect on the environment. As I just mentioned, there has been a complete lack of investment in the local economy, which has meant that the infrastructure, the hospitals, the schools, housing, etc., is simply not there on the level required. In addition, whenever and wherever oil deposits are discovered, the Nigerian authorities give little to no thought to the local environmental risks. This often leads to severe damage to crops and the ecosystem. So until these three main issues are addressed. Moving on to my next point, it seems that the situation in Nigeria at the present time is one of lose-lose. That is to say, it is hard to find any stakeholders who are winning, who are benefiting from the situation right now. I say this because earlier I implied that the multinational oil companies were the ones who were profiting most, but they too have their share of the problems which, in fact, could pose a threat to the limited progress achieved so far. Only last week, two of the major oil companies were hinting that they may pull out of the country as the situation there, which they had previously imagined could not get much worse, did indeed become so. Clearly, if these giants of the oil industry were to leave, the consequences for the country could be catastrophic. So, what are these issues which are making life for the oil companies so much harder? Well, firstly, some of the militant groups, it seems, are now able to attack oil facilities in deep water off the Nigerian coast. These structures, which are used for production, storage, and offloading, were previously thought to be out of reach of the militant groups. But one such attack recently forced an oil company to halt its production, and this effectively blocked off in the region 220,000 barrels per day. Aside from the commercial problems, however, there is of course now serious concern for the safety of the staff on board these vessels. And security is not only an issue out at sea, but on land too. One of the oil companies, who are hinting that they may pull out, pointed to an onshore pipeline which was blown up by militants last month. Again, The commercial damage was in the region of 120,000 barrels, along with an increase in oil prices globally. Coupled with the violence, it is a second major headache for the oil companies: the reinterpretation of contracts by the new government. The government is claiming that the oil companies have, for too long, reaped excessive profits and benefited unfairly, and therefore they, the government, want to impose new legislation on the multinationals. The multinationals claim that the government is trying to rewrite the rules and apply them retroactively. They also claim that the government has failed to deliver its full share of the investment required of them under the joint venture agreements. So, as you can imagine, if this legislation is passed, it could result in the companies shifting their attention and their considerable resources to other areas of the world, and that could leave Nigeria with less stability than it already has. We will look at where these battles are likely to take us after the break.